Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this week's episode, I'm joined by vet Tommy Heffernan, which most of you may know as Tommy the Vet, in a two-part interview. On the first episode, Tommy highlights the do's and don'ts and top tips related to calving the suckler cow. I first asked Tommy to talk me through the stages of the calving process.
I suppose, like every mammal, the cow has three stages of calving. The first stage is probably the longest stage, where she gets ready. The calf sends a signal to the cow that it wants to hit the real world, and that stage takes anywhere between 12 to 8 hours. And what's happening there, Catherine, is the calf is coming up into the cervix and the cervix is opening. And this is often a stage when we get a little bit restless on farm and maybe intervene a little bit too early. The next stage then is the important stage, when the cervix is open and the cow is actually starting to calve. So the calf is coming up into the pelvis. This is often when we see the water bag coming out, the feet maybe appearing, and the cow is starting to push that calf up, and that can last anywhere between half an hour to 4 hours. And then the last stage is the actual calving, the expulsion of the calf itself and the placenta after. So they're the three stages of calving, Catherine.
I suppose you hit it there, Tommy. Really, one of the main worries among farmers is, how long do you wait before you intervene? How long is too long?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I suppose from experience, we tend to get a little bit panicky around calving. We certainly intervene maybe a little bit early. So a cow is a precocious species. So basically, she likes to go off and calve on her own, be left alone. So I think if a cow is a bit restless, that's a normal thing before calving. So that's the value of calving cameras too, to watch them from afar. So we try not to disturb them when they're, the pins are dropping, they're a little bit restless, they can be getting up and down. How long is too long? I think when we start seeing that second stage, when you see the water bag out for, more than 2 hours and no progress has been made, I think that's a time that we start thinking about taking a look and handling that cow. If we see straining in particular, so if a cow is starting to force for more than maybe 30 minutes and she's making no progress, we're not seeing any progress with feet coming or anything like that, the tail is up. Again, that's a time when you might go in and start thinking about handling that cow, because in the first stage of labor, as I described, the calf is in a very safe place. The placenta is attached. There's no contractions happening in the uterus. When a cow starts forcing for 30 minutes or longer, then you have a slight danger in that the placenta is going to be detached, and that oxygen supply for the calf is going to be compromised. So I would always say to people, if the water bag's out for 2 hours, maybe if the water bag's discolored, obviously, if it's a younger heifer, or maybe a heifer that shouldn't have been in calf, you'd always act a little bit quicker. But generally, cows, we give them a bit of time. The calf is safe unless there's a lot of forcing and the water bag is out. If you see a calf, obviously, again, with a swollen tongue or something like that, you might want to get in there quicker.
And when the farmer starts to handle the cow, what are the key things that they're looking for, that it's a normal presentation?
Yeah, normal is the great word. Normal to me, like every time, and I say this to any young farmers or even young vets, is every time you do get to handle a cow, feel and have a good feel of normal, have a good feel of legs, space around the head. What we want to see, and most farmers will notice, is the normal presentation will be your two front legs coming, and your head engaging in the pelvis. And again, it's very hard, I suppose, on a podcast to describe this, but having a space around the head, and maybe those front legs are coming to a point that they're not crossing, and you understanding that space, and it only comes from experience really, and putting your hand in there and understanding what the normal is. But it's an area we really need to get good at. Anytime you have a chance to put your hand in, always have a good idea of space, because we really need to, that's a really key time when the head and legs are in the pelvis, before we start applying any pressure, that we know that it's a time to stop and think, have we got space here? And it can be very deceiving as well, because we don't know what's coming after the head and legs, whether the shoulders are big or whether, this calf has big hips. And that'll be down to knowledge about maybe your stock bull or AI bulls, but it can be a difficult time. It's a real tricky point to make decisions on.
And obviously, if there is an issue that there's a leg down or head back or the calf is coming backways, what's the best approach then?
Yeah, well, again, it's down to experience. So what are you feeling? What's normal? Okay. One that always, will occasionally catch people out is your twisted calf bed, right? So when you go in and, you have a full twist on the uterus and you put your hand in, it feels like going into a tunnel. You don't know whether the cow is calving or she's not. If you're feeling anything that's not normal and you're not sure, that's time to call for help. If you have legs back or heads back, again, it's about slow manipulation, working with the cow. Remember, having your gloves and your lube on to protect yourself and protect the cow, and having some sort of a time frame in your head around how much time you spend manipulating legs, particularly if it's a difficult breech and the cow's been calving for a while. Getting legs up can be very difficult. Working very carefully. The vagina of the cow is quite tough and durable, but when you start manipulating legs inside the womb, you can do quite a bit of damage. So I'd say to farmers, have a time in your head, be it 5 or 10 minutes, where you give yourself time to slowly manipulate legs into the right position, the normal position you'd expect. And if you're not making progress, then call for help and work with the cow. When she's forcing, it's not a time to be pulling on legs, because that's when she's forcing the womb and you're pulling pressure on that leg. It can be when you do damage as well. When you're manipulating legs, cupping those hooves in your hand if you can at all, to prevent damaging that uterus.
You have some great tips there, Tommy. From your experience, what are the main things that you should be avoiding?
Avoiding around calving. Well, look, you could talk about calving for hours. The main thing is never take a chance. Never, like a cesarean section. It may be a big cost, but it's a lot less traumatic on your calf than a hard calving or pull. So again, if you know the normal, if you're feeling something that's unusual, and look, it doesn't happen too often, but we can have calves with watery belly that might feel those legs and the head are normal, and then suddenly you get to a point and that big balloon of a belly is stopping things. So if you're not feeling the normal, ask why, and I think it's always a time to stop. Don't chance that calf with a big head and legs. If the legs are crossed, particularly if you feel those big feet and the front feet are crossed, it can often be an indication as well that the shoulders are very big in that calf. Understand, have as much knowledge as you can around the genetics of the bull that you might be using, and whether it's the potential for difficult calving, but don't take chances, and know the normal is the key message for me.
That's great advice, Tommy. I suppose most farmers are well used to using a calving jack at this stage. Can you talk me through what are the key things that farmers need to be aware of when using a calving jack?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing, and we might come to it as well, is the key thing for me, if nothing else is remembered from this, is remember, and I've been caught like myself with this, is the cow is health and safety at calving. Before, we cannot say it enough. A cow or a heifer at calving time is probably one of the most dangerous animals on the farm. 2 occasions in my 15 and a half years in practice, the only 2 times I came in compromise was with cows at calving time. It can be very unpredictable, so just proper restraint, before you put on the calving jack. So having your sculling gate, having your gate, keeping a gate between you and the cow, having the cow properly restrained before you go using the calving jack is really, really important. Again, having your lube and your gloves, plenty lubrication, gloves. And when you're applying the calving jack as well, we're often using the calving jack with the Moore Park head. Make sure it fits on the cow. You don't trap the tail. So, your bigger cows, sometimes you have to, you'll see some farmers, they'll actually open out that Moore Park head a little bit to fit on the cow, making sure it's not blocking on the vagina. And remember, the calving jack is a fabulous tool, but it's a weapon of mass destruction as well, because it can put on the pressure of about 3 adults, which is a huge amount of physical force. And we need to work with the natural cycle of the cow when she goes to calve. We need to work with her when she's forced. We don't put too much pressure too early. Work with the cow when you're using the calving jack, and just be aware of the pressure that it can put on. So we often tend to panic a little bit with the calving jack, and I would say go easy with the calving jack and remember the pressure that it can apply.
From your experience of the 15 and a half years as a vet, are there any tips that you've seen farmers use on their farms or that you've used where there's difficulty getting a calf out?
Yeah. I suppose, again, I'd always err on the side of caution, but having the right ropes on your calving jack, okay? Having a calving jack, now's the time before calving comes to make sure the jack is working. The last thing you want is a jack that's not, the jack mightn't have been used since last year. Check your calving jack, make sure it's working. I always go for the bigger type of rope, and I'd always prefer the bigger calving ropes and just put them on correctly. It's hard to describe it again on a podcast, but I'd always put a rope around the top of the fetlock, and I'd actually put a second lap on it, so you're spreading the pressure on it on both legs. Again, plenty lubrication and knowing what space is about, and look, legs and heads can fit into the pelvis, but just being aware of those shoulders, watching for that crossing of legs. And taking your time. Another thing we must remember is when the calf is engaged in the pelvis and the chest is engaged, you're starting, you're changing the process of how that calf gets its oxygen from the placenta to the calf will actually start breathing when it comes out through the pelvis. So a lot of times as well when the calf is maybe at the hips and stuff like that, we seem to see a lot of pressure on. The calf at that stage can actually breathe, so sometimes it's actually better to slow down there. We get a little bit panicky often at that stage because the calf is nearly out. But I'd never be afraid to stop at that stage when the calf is out past the chest to let it actually take a breath.
Finally, you've mentioned there the importance of restraining the cow at calving, and that is a key part on the farm, and a lot of farmers are using calving gates. What are the key points that farmers can keep in mind this calving season before it starts in 2021?
Best investment you can make is a good calving gate. Obviously, the position of that calving gate is important. Typically, we'd always want the calving gate in against the wall where the left-hand side of the cow is exposed if there was the need to do a section. And often most of us are right-handed as well. It's easier to manipulate the cow. The sculling gate as well, if you're going to calve a cow, it wouldn't be unusual when you put the pressure on that cow can go down. So just making sure that there's nothing to obstruct her neck. Again, if there's gates that are pushed in against the cow that, maybe you have a lot of people will use chains around the back of them, maybe having a rope that can be cut as a quick release if there's pressure on the cow. I would say there are some of the key things I would think about. Again, having your water, being prepared in advance, having maybe your cold water for that calf that, into the ear, just having as much preparation as possible. And as well, the gloves and the lubrication are very important. They're very important for the perspective of not introducing infection and not getting infections ourselves as well. And one thing I would say, and this is one thing I'm a huge advocate for, calving is a massive metabolic stress in the cow, but it's a physical stress in the cow as well. And one of the things I'd always say to farmers is we typically go, if a cow's had an intervention at the calving or maybe a bit of a heavier pull, we'd always say, oh, she needs a shot of antibiotics. But it's the anti-inflammatory pain medication for the cow there that can make a huge difference. Huge vascularity in that area of the vagina and uterus, and there can be a lot of bruising, and that can cause pain. And one thing we want the cow to do is when she has calved, is we want her to take up with the calf and start eating. And pain relief is probably underutilized in those hard calvings, and I think it's a great tool to use for any time we have intervention.
This is something maybe farmers can discuss with their own vets.
Yeah, it's a prescription medicine, absolutely. Yeah, and I did a lot of calving, a lot of lambing, and one of the things I've definitely noticed that it improved. And of course, in practice, you would be called out to the more difficult cases. So it was a standard where would have administered anti-inflammatory medication, and I'd be a huge advocate. But a conversation to have with your vet. Yeah.
Some really interesting insights from Tommy there, and make sure to join me next week for the second part of the interview with Tommy when I cover caring for the newborn calf. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and thanks to Tommy for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.